Hi, hi there, everybody. Welcome. I'd like to welcome you to the Freedom from Government YouTube channel, first ever live broadcast. This is because Freedom from Government is now a partner, and you're going to be seeing more live events in the future like this. And I'd like to welcome everybody out on Easter Sunday. And I don't care if you're celebrating spring, the equinox, resurrection of somebody. You can celebrate whatever you want. If you're here, that's awesome because freedom is non-denominational. And yeah, speaking of freedom, I've written a few books here. This is the first book I wrote. You don't want to read what this man has to say. It's basically each chapter is a question and then my answer to that question. My second book, Freedom from Government: How to Reclaim Your Power. It's 356 pages. It basically, once you read it, I wrote it so that you wouldn't be able to deny, your own power and begin to reclaim it. And then I wrote The Rebirth of Mankind, Homo Evolutus. This book is about transhumanism, nanotechnology, genetics, artificial intelligence, synthetic biology, electronics, and the fact that we will soon be able to augment and change our very bodies at the molecular level. This convergence of these technologies spells some exciting prospects for the future, but at the same time, there exists a danger so great that extinction of every living organism on the planet is closer than we think. So we must be aware of our past to know where the future leads. Ignorance is not bliss, it is terminal, and awareness is the cure. I've also written Freedom from Government: Status Delusions. This is basically every argument that I could think of about different delusional status remarks and how these sentiments basically usually are immoral, irrational, and usually have no basis in fact whatsoever. For example, without rules there would be chaos, to taxes or fees for services, and the economy would collapse without government. Yeah. And of course, no status argument would be complete without the who would build the roads question. But anyway, this book covers also topics like the use of force, divine right, the social contract, healthcare, voting, sacrificing your liberty for security. If you don't like it, you can leave. Who hasn't heard that one that's fighting for freedom nowadays? Monopolies would abound without government, and many more. But anyway, this is available for you as well on Amazon and at shop.trentgoodbaudy.com, along with my newest and smallest book, Acting with Honor and as King. And I'm actually giving this away. I give this away for free at freedomfromgovernment.us. So pick that up. It's free. You have no excuse. So today I wanted to talk about a few things. First of which is a little bit of general philosophy on statism. I've been getting quite a few comments on my channel about people, they say, oh, you just don't want to obey the law and blah, blah, blah. We're going to get to that. I'm going to explain all about, what people think is the law and what the law really is a little later on. But, my general philosophy about statism is it's a religion, in my opinion. It's a religion of black magic based on the control of others. And they use spells, books filled with words and spells. They call them statutes, and all kinds of other black magic. Like, you ever notice how the judge is up above everybody else, and he's wearing a black robe, and he's it's just really it's a ritual. It's religious, and I believe it's satanic. So everybody out there, just don't mindlessly defend evil. It seems kind of absurd. And do research and evaluate your beliefs, because it's real easy to accept beliefs secondhand from from a third party, and without investigating them, you usually just accept them, and that's not always good. We need to to examine the world with a critical eye and be logical and moral. So, who are you? Are you a member of the bar? Should you even be playing that game when you go to court? So, use investigation and logic. Don't ever take a second-hand belief as first-hand information. So, I guess we're on to the questions that people wanted me to answer today. Chris asked what the top 5 things to say to the police when stopped and driving with no license. And for that, I'm going to refer to an article I have on my freedomfromgovernment.us page. What do I say during a traffic stop? I'm going to read a little bit of that for you right now. And I'll start right now. Always, always, always carry a recording device. Make sure it's charged up and it has plenty of memory to record the entire encounter. You need evidence to sue these guys for false arrest after the fact if that is the case. So always make a record. Don't rely on their recording. Don't ever rely on their recording equipment. Chances are it'll get lost. The second you think you may be about to have an encounter with an agent, activate your recording device immediately. It also helps to have a pen and paper to write any notes, especially names and badge numbers. It's also helpful to have a cell phone in addition to your recording equipment so that you can call someone or even fake it if you need to or want to and have them as another witness as to what happened during your encounter. It's helpful to even have them make a recording of the call if they can. If you call someone, do not hang up during the encounter. If necessary, act like you are still on the phone, even if you have lost a connection. Tell them that you have your counsel on the phone and will not comply with any of their demands without proper advice from your counsel. There's no law about being on the phone during interaction with law enforcement, and it is absurd for them to claim it is for their own safety that you not be on the phone. Simply absurd. So what you say and do during a traffic stop can mean a world of difference, from simply getting a citation and being released to continue on your way, or being unlawfully hauled off to jail, having your private property stolen, etc., etc. The following is designed to protect your unalienable rights, which means rights that cannot be taken away, and I can't stress that enough. People have totally lost what an unalienable right is. They came from God. We're going to leave it at that. I don't care who you think God is, but that's where they came from, and they didn't come from government, so they're mine, not yours. The government didn't give them to me. They came from somewhere greater than everybody. So yeah, this is designed to protect your rights, your body, and your property, but there are no guarantees. There are some real brain-dead thugs out there operating under color of law. Some of the people enforcing the law out there have absolutely no clue about it. It's up to us to help them learn on a case-by-case basis. And I was going to say this later, but the moment they infringe your rights is the moment they lose their protection of immunity. They don't have protection once they start to violate your rights. And our rights, they're enumerated by the Constitution, but they came from God. So the government didn't give us any rights. They can't take them away, no matter what. And they can't change a right into a privilege. For example, making you get a driver's license so you can travel. No, I don't think so. And we'll get to more about that traveling thing later. But anyway, back to the traffic stop. You have to be in control, not only of yourself, but the exchange of information and your own actions and your emotions, especially your emotions. Do not allow an emotion such as anger or fear to set in. It'll corrupt your judgment and decision making, and the cop will read and use that energy signature to his own advantage against you. How would Jesus act? Don't worry about if Jesus really exists or existed. Just personify his attitude and mental state during the encounter. You want the video evidence to show that you kept your cool the entire time and maintaining self-control. Also, ask others in the car to please not say anything unless it is according to this procedure. If they're unfamiliar with the concepts, it's a great opportunity to help another understand what we're all about. Someone that doesn't understand the concepts can get you in just as deep a shit as you could without knowing the concepts. So if they can't keep quiet or say the right things, you might want to reconsider having them around in the first place. So, some points to remember. Law enforcement is required to read your rights before any questioning or searches. In other words, you are not free to leave. You're not free to leave, and they will let you know if you're under arrest. Clarify if they mean custodial arrest. Cops are trained to lie to you about being in custodial arrest, and they often say that you are under investigative detention. There's a blatant lie, though, and you can call them on it. The reading of your rights acts in your favor unless you act like an idiot or ramble on about nonsense. They hardly ever read your rights, so if they don't, anything incriminating you say or fruit of an illegal search can be suppressed as an involuntary or coerced statement or illegal warrantless search and seizure. So that's number one. Number two, don't ever answer the cops' questions. You have the right to remain silent. Use it. Being silent does not mean become unresponsive. Just don't speak. Do not give any information or documents in response to the cops' questions. Invoke your protected right to remain silent and to assistance of counsel, and then refuse to waive them. See what I have back here? Refuse to waive them ever. And this piece of paper back here, you can just have it. You can show it to them through the window. And that looks like it's backwards, is it? Anyway, you can just show this to him. It says, I remain silent, no searches. I want my attorney present before answering any questions. I don't consent to towing of my private property. Violation of my inherent unalienable rights will give me standing to seek remedy, which means sue, and also activates my fee schedule. Please leave any tickets under the wiper and take heed of your actions this day. Anyway, back to this. Remaining silent goes for documents and verbal testimony. So don't give them any documents. Don't answer any questions. Don't ever waive those rights either. The moment you comply with an officer's demands, you have just waived your rights. So don't do it. Remember not to engage the officer in idle dialogue or other conversation, such as where you're going or coming from. Their main objective is to get a DUI arrest or a drug bust. Bottom line, that's it. So don't give them anything to help their investigation. Only say things that are specifically directed at preserving your rights and nothing else. Also, don't answer questions like, do you know why I pulled you over? You know what I would answer that with? Do you know why I pulled you over? I would say, was there an emergency? And if you don't think it's wrong to initiate your emergency lights without there being an emergency, try screaming fire in a movie theater next time. You know, you're in a full movie theater. I believe it's a felony. Anyway, they're trying to get a drug bust, so don't give them anything to help their investigation. Only say things that are specifically directed at preserving your rights and nothing else. And, you know, don't answer questions like, do you know why I pulled you over? Are you aware of that? They even tell you it will be used against you, so don't do it. Roll up your windows and lock your doors before you stop. Make sure they're locked. I learned the hard way that one time a cop stole my car, and he just opened the door. The locks were malfunctioning anyway, but he just opened the door. Step on out. So roll up your windows, all of them, and lock your doors before you stop. Before you stop. Don't ever open the door or get out unless it is nice out. Then hop out real quick, keeping your hands in plain view before the cop can do anything, and lock your keys in your car and just tell him it is your habit. Get a magnetic hide key and hide a spare somewhere only you know about. This makes the search a moot point because you don't have access to any weapons that may be inside. Plus, the cop no longer has an excuse or the ability or authority to conduct a warrantless search of the car, even if they tow it. But if it is freezing or raining outside, then let the cop stand in it while you calmly and slowly go through this script. Don't ever roll down more than one window because a cross breeze, the cop might claim you smelled or something illegal, no matter what he says. And don't roll the window down any more than 2.5 inches. When the cop complains about this, just say, I believe I can hear you fine, and I'm most comfortable with the window at its level. Never give the cop consent to search your car at any time for any reason. Ever. It's a good way to get evidence planted or discovered that could be used against you criminally. And it won't matter if you knew it was there or not because you consented to the search. It's kind of a no-brainer. Cops cannot just walk up to you and begin demanding things. So never give them anything. And especially do not give them false information. Cops can lie, and they do it all the time. They likely will threaten you with physical abuse, jail, and other torture. Remember this. Anyone resorting to force or violence is not in control. Okay? So don't try to educate the cop at the stop. Wait until cross-examination, if you even get that far, or the civil suit to teach him the real lessons. Don't quote code or statute. It's not yours. It's copywritten. You can't even use it if you wanted to. Don't use it. Never interrupt your enemy while he's busy making mistakes, because it's giving you standing to sue him at a later time. So once you obtain, oh yeah, and Chris, I also wanted to tell you that when you get stopped, the first 5 things to say to them, remember, it's all contracting. Everything they make is an offer. Everything they say that you don't agree with right away is an offer. Unless you agree to it, it's just an offer. And they usually want something from you of value. So what, like for example, if a cop wants to know my name, if he asks my name, I would turn it around and make a counteroffer. What's your name? Counteroffer. And if he gives up the info, you just got something of value without giving away something of yours that was valuable. And you might ask him, he might say, okay, I gave you my name, so give me yours now. And at that point, you can give him your name, but I would make sure that you don't associate it with the legal person, the one that was created by government. And we'll get more into that in a little bit. But anyway, once you obtain the officer's name and badge number, use both of them every time you address him. This works really well because you remind him that he's acting under color of law, and if he continues to violate your rights, he's not protected by that anymore. So you do this to make them aware that they are directly responsible for what they're doing, and that they are being directly associated with the unlawful acts or violation of your unalienable rights. It's good to address the cop by name when you're doing audio too, because then they know who, later on they'll know who you're addressing. When it gets to that point. So speaking of the cop, for the record, may I have your name and badge number, please? Hopefully he'll give it to you. I've had cops not even give me their name and badge number. They tell me their badge number is OR, or point at the badge or something. So, if they don't, then, it's on video or recorded, so it doesn't matter. That's their first mistake. So then you refer to them by their name and badge number. Is there a recording being made of this encounter? And if he says yes, is that recording comprised of both audio and video? If yes, are you relatively certain that your recording equipment is functioning properly for the purposes of making this recording? And is your body mic and camera, if any, turned on and functioning properly to the best of your knowledge? Who cares what he answers? But then you say, name and badge number. What is the emergency? And how can I help? And he'll say, oh, your light was burned out or something like that. That's definitely not an emergency. So then you say, name and badge number. What facts or information are you alleging gave you probable cause to stop and accost me? We don't even care what they say. As long as they get these questions out, we're good. Name and badge number. Do you have a properly signed and issued warrant authorizing you to search me or my property? If yes, name and badge number. Do you currently have that warrant in your possession? If so, I would like to see it, please. Name and badge number. Do you have a properly signed and issued warrant of arrest that accurately describes or names me as the person to be arrested? If yes, name and badge number. Do you currently have that warrant in your possession? If so, may I see it, please? For the record, I am not operating in a for-hire capacity by engaging in any form of transportation or other commercial use of the highways. Name and badge number. Please acknowledge that you have been so informed. Name and badge number. Am I under custodial arrest? If I am not under arrest, am I free to go? If he says yes, that's great, but he probably won't. So name and badge number. What is the articulable probable cause that leads you to believe that I have committed or am about to commit a crime that authorizes you to stop, detain, or arrest me? We don't even care what he answers. Then you say, for the record, name and badge number. In order to protect my rights and not waive any by error or accident, I wish to clarify my legal standing of the situation. You say that I am not free to go, so I must conclude that I am in a custodial arrest and not simply in an investigative detention. B. Therefore, I am invoking all of my fundamentally protected rights, including my right to remain silent and my right to assistance of counsel. From this point forward, I do not consent to providing you with any information or documents that could or will be used against me in a court of law or to possibly incriminate me. So please do not ask me to produce anything and give it to you. From this point forward, please do not ask me to answer any questions or to perform any form of test relating to any manner whatsoever without my attorney present. Name and badge number. Do you intend to harm, injure, or punish me by any method of assault, arrest, and or incarceration because I have invoked any of these fundamentally protected rights? Now let's face it, he's going to get upset, and he's going to likely say that the law, and we're going to get to the law here in a minute, the law requires that you produce a driver's license and other information on demand of a law enforcement officer. They'll probably also falsely accuse you of obstructing or interfering with a public officer, or just outright threaten you with violence against you or your property. It's a scare tactic. I've been told that I was going to go to jail before and didn't end up going to jail. So they are allowed to lie, and they do it all the time. Once again, though, don't let fear corrupt your decision making. Stay strong and you will make it out of it. But it is guaranteed to get intense. Invoking your rights cannot be converted into a crime. And if they do charge you for one of these bogus obstruction charges, you have a nice payday coming when you sue the crap out of them. If they continue to demand documents or information, repeat the following to them. For the record, name and badge number. No law is valid if it requires me in any way to waive my fundamentally protected rights in order to exercise any right or alleged privilege, and no law can convert the free exercise of any right into a crime. I have repeatedly informed you that I choose not to waive any of my fundamentally protected rights, so I ask you again, name and badge number. Do you intend to harm, injure, steal my property, or otherwise punish me for invoking my fundamentally protected rights? You have to be prepared for the officer to do or threaten exactly that. You usually start by threatening you with all kinds of crap, including falsified criminal charges. Only use the following once on the first officer that threatens you, though. Name and badge number. Due to your attitude, demeanor, and your continuous threats to falsify charges and commit acts of violence against me and my property while displaying a deadly weapon, I feel physically threatened and in fear for my life. I demand that you cease and desist and request the immediate presence of a supervisor. I do not consent to any of your actions, the use of force against me or my property, or to being forced to exit my car for any purpose, especially so that you may attempt to steal my property and or assault, injure, or kill me. Name and badge number. You are fully aware that I have already invoked my fundamentally protected right to remain silent and that my right to assistance of counsel. Do you intend to continue in your unlawful efforts to violate my rights? A. It is my belief that the information you are demanding may possibly be used against me in a court of law or in an attempt to incriminate me, and if that is so, then upon the advice of counsel, I must respectfully decline to provide you with any information or evidence that can possibly or would be used against me for those purposes. Name and badge number. I am asking you again, do you intend to continue to deny me my rights and falsely imprison me, or am I free to go? Don't speak directly to the officer. Keep your face as far away from him as you can. Doing so will likely result in the cop trying to get you for DUI. Beware of the following and respond correctly. Cop saying, "Sir, I smell alcohol and marijuana. I'm going to have to ask you to step out of the vehicle. Or, sir, are you aware that you allegedly did something, and I'm going to have to ask you to step out of the vehicle. Be sure that they're lying, though, because if you injured someone or harmed someone, you can and probably will be arrested. You don't harm. That's rule number one, do no harm. So when he says this, you say, name and badge number, your statement is patently false and an outright lie. Are you now trying to fabricate probable cause by making false statements into the record and false allegations against me? Even if they threaten to have a canine come out and do a search, or threaten to break your windows, you must not waive your rights due to fear. Tell the cop, I do not consent to being detained for any additional time or other purposes. Am I free to go, or are you going to continue to illegally terrorize, threaten, and falsely imprison me beyond the time needed to conclude this alleged traffic stop? Repeat this if needed. Name and badge number. You are fully aware that I have already invoked my fundamentally protected right to remain silent and my right to assistance of counsel. Do you intend to continue in your unlawful efforts to violate my rights? A. It is my belief that the information you are demanding may possibly be used against me in a court of law or in an attempt to incriminate me, and if that is so, then upon the advice of counsel I must respectfully decline to provide you with any information or evidence that possibly can or would be used against me for these purposes. Name and badge number. I'm asking you again. Do you intend to continue to deny me my rights and to falsely imprison me, or am I free to go? Don't speak directly to the officer. Keep your face as far away from him as you can. Cop, remember, he's trying to get you for the DUI. So, yeah. So, last thing, tell the cop, I do not consent to being detained for any additional time or other purposes. Am I free to go, or are you going to continue to illegally terrorize, threaten, and falsely imprison me beyond the time needed to conclude this alleged traffic stop? And pretty much at that point, you've said everything you need to say to set yourself up to get, to have a nice payday when you do the lawsuit. The next question was from Nick. And yeah, I guess that took a little bit for your question, Chris, to answer that, but hopefully that did it. The short and sweet top things to say to a cop when he pulls you over and he says, do you know why I pulled you over? You ask him, was there an emergency? We covered that already. The second thing, he'll demand license, registration, and proof of insurance, and to that you say, do I have the right to remain silent? Silence goes for both verbal and documentation. So if you ask him if you have the right to remain silent, you're not making a statement, but you are, letting him know that you do have that right to remain silent. And the third thing, usually he'll threaten you and say, you're going to jail, da. And then that's when you ask him, do you have the power to convert a right into a crime? He doesn't. And we're going to get to what law is here in a minute, but traffic code is not law. So Nick says, how do you travel to other corporations or countries? That's a tough one. You got to get a passport because that's the corporate laws. I mean, maybe I could think about making a passport. I think Divine Province has passports because they actually have filed, or they're an actual country without a geographic location, but you can be a national of that country without having to live there. You could be a resident without abiding there. So that's pretty much it. It seems like until something is done about that, we really are at a loss for being able to travel. Until more people start, getting awareness that we're all on this rock. We're all just on a rock together. The government has drawn all these lines across the map saying that, this is different from this. But, it was all just one rock when we started out. And we're all just inhabitants of that. So I hope that answers your question. Sean asks, how would I go about filing to avoid paying income taxes? And how do I access the money for my Strawman? It's a touchy subject because to avoid, how do you go about filing to avoid paying income taxes? That's the wrong idea. Because, see, never has a willful failure to file or tax evasion case been filed against someone that hasn't already entered into evidence in the form of their signature and agreement, and actually signature under penalty of perjury on the tax forms. There's never been any case prosecuted where they didn't have those forms already in evidence. So you don't file to avoid paying income taxes. You simply do not do it. And if you're forced to fill out a W-4 from your employer or whatever that one is, either you write exempt on there, or you write exempt on the form, and then you can fight it. I talk a lot more about that in this book here, but that's a really thick chapter, and that's basically it boils down to you volunteer to pay taxes. That's how it works. So just stop volunteering is what I would say. Okay, so next. What is a law? I think we're going to do what is a law, and then we're going to probably call it a day. But this will take a little bit. So I got an email from a guy the other day, and I kind of told him where I was at as far as my beliefs and stuff, and he says he understands about the Bar Association. They're a bunch of crooks or whatever, and he has also understood that man cannot abide without set laws. He says, I would agree that the laws are being misrepresented and misused by the very people sworn in to uphold and defend them. This is the very thing they are attempting to teach. So he says he's not inclusive. Unlike myself, he attempts to live within the lines that seem to become more and more blurry every day. So what lines is he actually living within? He says he wishes me the best in walking outside of those lines, but he's not concerned about living outside of the law. So this brings me this, and someone else also. I mean, there's been lots of comments. Oh, you don't think you have to follow the law? Well, here's my response to him. I said, yes, it is appalling sometimes to witness the atrocities that are done in the name of government today. And you make a very good point about the laws. But are legislated code and statute actually laws? Then here's some case law for you. A statute is not a law. Florney versus First National Bank of Shreveport, Louisiana. That's the first one. A code is not a law. In Self-Shea 2D 261, and it's in point of fact. It's in point of fact in law. A concurrent or joint resolution of legislature is not law. Koenig versus Flynn. There's a bunch here. Ward versus State of Oklahoma. Todd versus Yale, Washington. All codes, rules, and regulations are for government authorities only, not human creators in accord with God's laws. All codes, rules, and regulations are unconstitutional and lacking due process of law. Rodriguez versus Ray Donovan, U.S. Department of Labor, 1985. I think that perhaps we are confusing what laws really are and the true role of government. Government was created by the people, and I'm sure that we can agree on that. So the government is essentially the servant of the people. There is a maxim of law that says you cannot control what you did not create. And to me, this means that our government was never meant to control us, but to serve us. The government are our employees. I hope we are on the same page so far. So, as employees of ours, at what point do we allow our employees to write and legislate law and apply it to basically us, its employer? We employ them to serve us, to actually find people guilty by proxy of the person, which is a legal fiction, not even ever have a real victim anymore. All crimes are prosecuted not for the victim these days, but for the state. One does not have the right, but also the duty to disobey an unjust law. Sorry, I meant to say, does one not have the right, but also the duty to disobey an unjust law? I cannot claim that the Constitution applies to me. I did not sign it, and I really have nothing to do with it. I have no part of it. But every agent of the government has the duty to uphold it when they have sworn an oath to uphold it and defend it. It is the rules or rights the government wrote down that they are not supposed to infringe, although the government did not give us any rights. They simply enumerated them, only for government, but not for citizens. Even the Declaration of Independence says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. So this quote is from the Declaration of Independence. It says some very important things, although you might not want to listen to it. It might sound like a bunch of blah, blah, blah. It says some very important things. First, it says that all men are created equal. To me, this means that no man is above another. If there is a law that is being applied unjustly to me or a specific group of people, it's against the law. Next, it states that us men have unalienable rights. This means they cannot be taken away or converted into privileges or even crimes. These rights simply are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which the Supreme Court has ruled means property. Pursuit of happiness means pursuit of property. So next, in that part of the Declaration of Independence, is the most important part. And it says that government derives its power from the consent of the governed, which to me means that we always have a choice whether we consent or not, and also that we have remedy in altering or abolishing it. So this brings me to my question that you open your second paragraph with: who draws the lines? Who makes the rules that you follow in your life? Does government rule you, or do you rule yourself? What rules do you live by? I only have two laws. They are do no harm and have no fraud in my contracts, which brings me to my next topic, the right to travel. It has to do with having fraud in your contracts. So this brings me to traveling in your car. It's your right. The free use of the public highways is your right. These are absolute truths without question, held up by courts in Canada, the United States, Australia, and the UK, and fully recognized, maybe not publicly, but they are recognized by police forces everywhere. To travel is a right. Period. Not a government-granted privilege. And use of your private automobile on public roads and highways cannot be regulated, taxed, restricted, or constrained in any way whatsoever, whether it be via police roadblocks and traffic stops, or by use of such schemes as mandatory insurance, registration, licensing, or other contracts. Listen carefully. The right of the citizen to travel upon the public highways and to transport his property thereon, either by horse-drawn carriage or by automobile, is not a mere privilege which a city can prohibit or permit at will, but a common right which he has under the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is Thompson versus Smith. And well, they're talking about horse-drawn carriages, so that means it must be obsolete. No, that means ever since and still we have the right to travel. And from the day of the signing of the Magna Carta in 1215 and the day of the horse and buggy, highways have been free to the public. New rights can be granted, but existing rights cannot be taken away. This is a basic principle of common law. The Constitution was adopted in 1787. Until then, the court relied on common law, which were laws basically inherited from Britain. So the common law, basically the Magna Carta, was signed in 1215 when people placed a knife to the throat of King John and demanded to have certain liberties. Jumping back to the Constitution, it doesn't override any previous rights or give us any rights. They just talk about rights that are inherent. Our rights are inherent. They came from God, in other words. So examples of these rights, these unalienable rights, are personal security, personal liberty, the right to own and enjoy personal property. So I want to get this clear right now. The government does not own the highways. The government holds the highways in trust for the people. Example is a trustee is holding your money but has no jurisdiction to spend it without your consent, even if he thinks it's in your best interest. The rules of the Highway and Traffic Acts are there. They're just acts. Code, policy are there to regulate the use of the highways in the public's interest, but not to destroy your rights to use them. Traveling on a public highway in your car is a right, not a privilege. Please, people. Also, fees. An execution of a right cannot be charged a fee. Insurance fees cannot be mandatory. Other types of unlawful fees are parking fees, speeding tickets, charges for registration and renewal of your driver's license. Those are simply there to raise revenue for the cops. That's it. So, are you a driver? Are you sure? Or are you a traveler? Do you receive compensation when you travel because you're transporting goods or persons for hire? If you're not receiving compensation, you're not driving, you're traveling. United States Code, Title 18, Section 31 even says a definition of a motor vehicle. The term motor vehicle means every description of carriage or other contrivance propelled or drawn by mechanical power and used for commercial purposes on the highways and the transportation of passengers, passengers and property, or property and cargo. So in there it said used for commercial purposes. They can't say used for commercial purposes and not used for commercial purposes. Only one of them is in there, so only one of them applies. And then later on they define what they mean, used for commercial purposes. The term used for commercial purposes means the carriage of persons or property for any fare, fee, rate, charge, or other consideration, or directly or indirectly in connection with any business or any other undertaking intended for profit, private profit, public roads. That's how it works. The DMV really appreciates your belief that you need a license, registration, and insurance, even though a small fraction actually use their motor vehicle for commercial purposes. Any common dictionary will tell you that the word drives means directing something or someone to a destination. But commercial means a venture wherein there is a profit or intended profit. A business is a commercial venture. Motor carrier authority is exercised over commercial transportation. A vehicle engaged in commercial transportation is called a commercial vehicle. Commercial transportation is the acting as a third party in the movement of passengers with tickets or goods with bills of lading in the exercise of the liberty or property rights. Since the exercise of exchanging one's skill and labor for money is a right, the driving of a commercial transportation vehicle cannot be deemed an unlawful act requiring a license. Therefore, the term driver or commercial driver can only apply to an owner or operator. Then what is the crime in driving? Driving is a commercial venture which uses public highways as a tool. This usage is a form of theft. Remember, theft entails unauthorized use as well as the unlawful physical confiscation or stealing of property. A license is a waiver of prosecution for doing something that would normally be unlawful. A license is a form of a contract. A contract must have three factors, which are an exchange of property of equal value, full disclosure of the terms, and three, entered into voluntarily by all parties concerned. A contract exchanging your property, right to travel, for the privilege of driving certainly isn't a valid contract. Generally, an owner of property issues a permit or permission statement when there may be a situation where the user of someone else's property may be brought to question. A trustee representing a large group of owners would issue a license. The government is the trustee of the public highways and roads and therefore has the authority to issue licenses for drivers. Upon receiving and acknowledging by your signature that you are a driver, you have admitted and signed confession that you are doing something unlawful. No fraud in your contracts. So the public record of your signed application constitutes a guilty plea, just as if it had been entered into a permanent record of a court of law. Now, drawing from your own source of knowledge, you can understand that there is no trial or jury for someone who is charged with a crime who enters a guilty plea on their own. That person proceeds directly into custody as a convicted criminal. That person, which is a legal fiction, becomes a ward of the crown or court, and guards or wardens have military-type control over that person until his sentence or his debt to the public is completed. How does this apply to drivers? Well, driver's licenses are issued for a fixed period. The term of the sentence for the unlawful act. Licenses expire, but the unlawful act is still of public record. Unlawful acts have no statutory limitation, so presumably you can forever be held accountable for the unlawful act of being a driver. Oh, excuse me. The police act under the authority of a prison warden or guard and acting as enforcement officers of the Motor Vehicle Act. They are not acting as peace or public officers. Now you know why. They can issue citations, decide fines, search vehicles, confiscate vehicles, arrest and confine people without a warrant and or with no evidence of a crime as described in the common law, and maybe they even stretch it to the point of searching homes without a warrant, as this federal gun control legislation supposedly authorizes. Our government has converted us all into convicted criminals through our own negligent, fraudulent use of the driver's license in other fraudulent contracts and licensing schemes, such as the marriage license. There are many precedent-setting cases as well as rulings in case law which state this very clearly. You can see them on my website, freedomfromgovernment.us. But the right to travel derives from the inalienable property right in that one has the right to exchange or sell property. The place of exchange or sale of property is the market, a term with broad meaning. Travel to market is guaranteed through the property right. Remember, labor and skills are a property. Also, the right to travel is included in your right to go to church, to the church of your choice. The travel rights were invoked in ancient times to prevent interference in the exercise of primary rights. The right to travel is part of the absolute right of liberty. Liberty also entails the right to exercise other rights. So in the above definitions, there's a question as to whether a person who is hired or contracted to drive in a commercial vehicle is actually doing anything that could be considered unlawful and therefore in need of a license. It seems that the licensing need would fall only upon owner-operator or the owners of a trucking or business company. Does that make sense? Anyhow, if you're not in the business of commercial trucking or busing, why do you have a driver's license? What is freedom if one is not free to move from point A to point B unregistered and unlicensed? Despite actions of police and local courts, higher courts have ruled that we have a right to travel without government permits. A vehicle is property, and a person cannot be deprived of property without due process of law. The term property, within the meaning of the Due Process Clause, includes the right to make full use of the property which one has the unalienable right to acquire. Every citizen has an unalienable right to make use of the public highways. Every citizen has full freedom to travel from place to place in the enjoyment of life and liberty. Period. What's so hard, to figure out about that? I'm not trying to break any laws. I'm just trying to exercise my God-given right to life and liberty and to owning property. Anyway, those who do not fight for their rights do not deserve them. Do I have to repeat that? Those who do not fight for their rights do not deserve them. Courts affirm that citizens have the right to travel freely on the public right-of-way. If a judge ever understood the public's right to use the public roads, it was Justice Tolman of the Supreme Court of the state of Washington. Justice Tolman stated, "Complete freedom of the highways is so old and well established a blessing that we have forgotten the days of the robber barons and toll roads, and yet under an act like this, arbitrarily administrated, the highways may be completely monopolized. If through lack of interest the people submit, then they may also look to see the most sacred of their liberties taken from them one by more or less rapid encroachment." And that's Robertson versus Department of Public Works in Washington. The words of Justice Tolman ring most prophetically in the ears of citizens throughout Canada and the USA today, as the use of the public roads has been monopolized by this very entity which has been empowered to stand guard over our freedoms, i.e., that of government. For many years, professionals within the criminal justice system have acted upon the belief that traveling by motor vehicle upon the roadway was a privilege that was gained by a citizen only after approval by the respective state government in the form of the issuance of a permit or license to that particular individual. Legislators, police officers, and court officials are becoming aware that there are now court decisions that prove the fallacy of the legal opinion that driving is a privilege and therefore requires government approval, i.e. a license. Some of these cases are Chicago Motor Coach versus Chicago, where it was stated even the legislature has no power to deny a citizen the right to travel upon the highway and transport his property in the ordinary course of his business or pleasure. Though this right may be regulated in accordance with the public interest and convenience, and regulated in this case means like by traffic safety enforcement, stop signs, stoplights, not a privilege that requires permission. For example, licensing, mandatory insurance, vehicle registration, etc. Case number 2, Thompson versus Smith. The right of the citizen to travel upon the public highways and to transport his property thereon, either by carriage or by automobile, is not a mere privilege which a city may prohibit or permit at will, but a common right which he has under the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It cannot be stated more conclusively that the citizens of the states have a right to travel without approval or restriction or licensing, and that this right is protected by the U.S. Constitution. Here are other court decisions that expound the same facts. Kent versus Dulles. The right to travel is a part of the liberty which the citizen cannot be deprived without due process of law under the Fifth Amendment. Schnackman versus Dulles. Undoubtedly, the right of locomotion, the right to remove one from one place to another according to inclination, is an attribute of personal liberty, and the right ordinarily of free transit from or through the territory of any state is a right secured by the 14th Amendment and by other provisions of the Constitution. So there's no room for speculation on these court decisions. The American citizen does indeed have the unalienable right to use the roadways unrestricted in any manner as long as they are not damaging or violating property rights of another. Government, in requiring the people to file for driver's licenses, vehicle registrations, mandatory insurance, and demanding they stop for vehicle inspections, DUI roadblocks, checkpoints, etc., without question are restricting and therefore violating the people's common law right to travel. Period. Is this a new legal interpretation on the subject of right to travel? Apparently not. The American Citizens and Lawmen Association, in conjunction with the U.S. Federal Law Research Center, are presently involved in studies in several areas involving questions on constitutional law. One of the very areas under review is in the area of citizens' right to travel. In an interview, a spokesman stated, upon researching the subject over many months, substantial case law has presented itself that completely substantiates the position that the right to travel unrestricted upon the nation's highways is and has always been a fundamental right of every citizen. This means that the beliefs, remember what I said about beliefs earlier? And opinions of our state legislatures, the courts, and those as involved in the law enforcement profession have acted upon for years have been an error. Researchers armed with actual facts state that U.S. case law is overwhelming in determining that to restrict in any fashion the movement of the individual American and the free exercise of their right to travel upon the roadways, excluding commerce, which the state legislatures are correct in regulating, is a serious breach of those freedoms secured by the U.S. Constitution and most state constitutions. It is unlawful. The revelation that the American citizen has always had the unalienable right to travel raises profound questions to those who are involved in making and enforcing state laws. The first of such questions may very well be if the states have been enforcing laws that are unconstitutional on their face. It would seem that there must be some way that a state can legally put restrictions such as licensing requirements, mandatory insurance, vehicle registration, roadblocks, just to name a few, on a citizen's constitutionally protected right, right? For the answer to this question, let us look once again to the U.S. courts for determination on this very issue. The case of Hurtado versus California, 110 U.S. 516, states very plainly, the state cannot diminish the rights of the people. The assertion of federal rights, when plainly and reasonably made, is not to be defeated under the name of local practice. David versus Weschler. Would we not say that these judicial decisions are straight to the point? That there is no lawful method for government to put restrictions or limitations on rights belonging to the people? Other cases involved are even more straightforward. For example, Miranda versus Arizona. Where rights secured by the Constitution are involved, there can be no rulemaking or legislation which would abrogate them. The claim, or Miller versus U.S., the claim and exercise of a constitutional right cannot be converted into a crime. There can be no sanction or penalty imposed upon one because of this exercise of constitutional rights. Shearer versus Cullen. There is no question that a citation ticket issued by a police officer for no driver's license, no current vehicle registration, no vehicle insurance, which carries a fine or jail time, is a penalty or sanction and is indeed converting a right into a crime. We could go on, quoting court decision after court decision. However, in addition, the Constitution itself answers our question. Can a government legally put restrictions on the rights of the American people at any time for any reason, such as the particular case when the government believes it to be this for the safety and welfare of the people? The answer is found in Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in this Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. What this means is that the Constitution is to be upheld over every state, county, or city laws that are in opposition to it. In the same article, it goes on to say just who is within our governments that is bound by the supreme law. You know what it says? It says the senators and representatives before mentioned and the members of the several state legislatures and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. Article 6. So, did you swear an oath? If you didn't swear an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, it has nothing to do with you. It's just worthless scribblings. George Bush is right. It's just a damn piece of paper. So, we know police officers are part of the executive branch. Article 6 above is called the Supremacy Clause, and it clearly states that under every circumstances, the above listed officials in these United States must hold this document's tenet supreme over any other law, regulations, or orders. Every U.S. police officer knows that they have sworn an oath to the people of our nation, and that we will not only protect their lives and property, but that we will uphold and protect their freedoms and rights under the supreme law of this nation, the U.S. Constitution. In this regard, then, we must agree that those within government that restricts a citizen's rights, such as restricting the people's right to travel, are acting in violation of his or her oath of office and are actually committing a crime against such citizens. Here's an interesting question. Is ignorance of these laws an excuse for such acts by officials? If we are to follow the letter of the law, as cops are sworn to do, this places officials that involve themselves in such unlawful acts in an unfavorable legal situation. For it is a felony and a federal crime to violate or deprive citizens of their constitutionally protected rights. So, many of our courts, attorneys, and police officials are just becoming informed about this important issue and the difference between rights versus privileges. We can assume that the majority of those Americans carrying state licenses, vehicle registrations, etc., have no knowledge of the rights they waived in obeying such laws. That the U.S. Constitution clearly states are unlawful. In other words, laws of no effect, or laws that just are not laws at all. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 13, states that everyone has the right, not a privilege, to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state. Everyone has the right, not privilege, to leave any country, including his own, and return to his country. Privileges are for slaves or chattel property owned by the government or Vatican, whoever owns whoever. Free men and women have rights, natural, unalienable rights. They cannot be taken away by government. They were not given to us by government. Government is our servant. And you can quote Murdoch versus Penn. No state shall convert a secured liberty into a privilege and then issue a license and fee for it. Or Shuttlesford versus Birmingham, Alabama. If the state does convert a secured liberty into a privilege and issues a license and a fee for it, you can ignore the license and fee and engage in the right with impunity. So what are you waiting for? If you've made it with me this far, an hour and 10 minutes in, we covered almost everything. Just about everything. All you have to do is start acting. Start acting without fear. Stop being slaves. Thank you for your time. Be sure to visit shop.freedomfromgovernment.us, freedomfromgovernment.us, for some fantastic tools, free items, books. I do all this for you. So I hope you appreciate it. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back again soon. Peace.